to understand the biblical parenting model. I say that because we're going to look at a few parenting models here, and I'll just explain a few of them here. But it is always challenging to parent, especially for us who are raising children presently, and some of you who find yourself with grandchildren and you are interacting with them in a whole lot, but your kids now tell you don't do this to them, but you did it to them and they turned out halfway decent or normal, right, you'd say. And but anyhow, and so it's a difference. And there's so many different things. I seen something, or somebody was telling me about this the other day, that don't tell your child no because it's going to retard them or do some other things like that by telling your child no, it's not this, and you reinforce it with positive things. There are constantly books that are sold about parenting, and there's even this whole radio station, and it sometimes have some pretty good stuff called Focus on the Family. You might have heard of that one. Comes on and have different things about the family. And so when I'm talking about making the best decision, no doubt it's a biblical decision, and let's look at the parenting model that we see from our Bible. All right. The parenting styles that we commonly see today falls into one of three positions. Number one is a authoritative or a disciplinarian. This one right here, it's my way or the highway. This one that I'm not going to budge or I'm not going to give in an inch. I think you definitely have to set boundaries. But my dad once told me this. He said, son, I was hard on y'all. My dad's ex-military man. He said, I was hard on y'all because when a tree is a sapling or when it's a shoot, you can put ropes or ties on it and you can make it grow whichever way you wish, right? But some of us know about bodark trees, right? And steel, and getting those STIHL steel saws and others, and burning some blades out with bodark, right? Bodark's a very hard wood, is it not? And you can burn some blades out on bodark. Well, when you get a tree that is full grown, it's not a lot that you can do with it then, is it? Besides start cutting that thing down, all right? And a lot of heart. But to me, authoritative or disciplinarian, you have to set certain things there, but then you have to allow that child to start to make his or her own decisions. And you're there to help them out the whole way. Yes, you still have boundaries, and yes, you don't let those boundaries go, and you still hold the line, but sometimes just simply saying, because I said so, it's not always the best. Because now they're looking for reason, and they soon will be out of your house. My mom said this to me a few years ago when my oldest was 12. Said, 6 years, you'll have an 18-year-old. I said, wow. You know, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. He's 14 now. And we think as parents, you know, am I doing everything and am I doing this? No doubt. They're going to get of age and they're going to make their own decisions. No matter how much we want them to do right from wrong and choose the better, they're free moral agents and they're going to make their choice. The purpose of this lesson is to look at biblical parenting and to do everything that we can to the best of our ability so that we can pillow our heads at night, knowing that I've tried my best. All right? That's this. I believe when we look at the scriptures, we will definitely see a part that's authoritative and disciplinarian, but you will also see a point where the father will say to the son, who is very insistent and rude and demanding of his inheritance, that the father gives it to him. Because he allows him to branch out and learn for his own. And when the son comes to him, he greets him with what? Open arms. All right? So there's a balance in which you try to strike. The next one is permissive and indulgent. Permissive meaning we allow these things to go on. It's really okay. I'm going to allow this. I'm going to look the other way. Almost like this coddling type thing. And yes, we are to have nurture and admonition and affection for our child, But this permissiveness and this indulgent, it raises brats because they're permissive. They're used to getting everything that they want, and in reality, it doesn't happen. So the idea of this child being told no, and when you and it always comes back to bite you and bite you at the worst moment. You've been at Wally World, and you've watched the child in the checkout go bonkers, right? It's just plain out embarrassing. And what you want to do is really swat the parents for allowing the kid to act like that, all right? But that's what's coming, and that's what we see right now. Over and over and over again, I see that when I sub and when I drive the bus. I see more things that are allowed, and they indulge this kid and their bad behavior. And we're going to look at some scriptures about that. The uninvolved one is the idea of just allowing your child to be whatever he or she is going to be. And if this almost like I'm going to step back and you're going to create your own path. I look at this term as the hippie movement, kind of like just go along with it. It's all good and things like that. These three right here is what we commonly see. And a lot of my peers and even family members take this permissive or indulgent. And if you say anything about their child, it's how dare you? How dare you correct me, and how dare you do this? And then your children are left to think, if everybody else kids get to do this, why do mine get to do that? And when you're trying to stay with the biblical model, it's good to know that you're not the only one that's trying to stay with that. And so hopefully this can encourage us and better understand some things. All right, let's talk about these models. Now, do y'all see that picture? Can y'all see that? The monkey has got the baby monkey by the tail. You think you finna go somewhere. I said, come here. All right, Deuteronomy chapter 6, which is our first passage. All right, Kenny sang that song. And we talked about this one Sunday night, and that word is Shema, which hear, means to hear. And it means to hear with the understanding of doing and obeying. Hear is not just to allow the vibrations on your ear and then to understand the words that are processed through the brain. No, but it's to hear with the intent of doing. All right? So remember, Deuteronomy means literally the second giving of the law. And Moses is writing down these series of sermons, and he's admonishing the children of God before they go into Canaan's land. And Joshua is going to take over, and he wants them to remain faithful. And there are certain things that they are to do and to teach and to instruct. And I believe, based off Romans 15:4 and 1 Corinthians 10, that we can learn from this. In other words, those things which are written aforetime are written for our learning. In 1 Corinthians 10, we have those examples. In Hebrews chapter 12, we have a cloud of witnesses. All right? Now, let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 1. Now, this is the commandment, the statutes, and the rules that the Lord your God commanded me to teach to you, that you may do them in the land to which you are going over to possess it, that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your sons and your son's son, by keeping all the statutes and his commandments which I command you all the days of your life, and that your days may be long. Hear, Shema, therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Now here it is, verse 4 of the song. Hear, be attentive and listen and obey, O Israel. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. Now note verse 7. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. See the pattern? Constant teaching. Let's slow down a little bit. In order to fulfill that, and when you look at it, Ephesians chapter 6, Paul says to the Ephesians in regards to fathers, fathers, provoke not your children unto what? wrath, but rather bring them up in what? The nurture and the admonition, the instruction and the discipline of the Lord, right? So who has a primary role in teaching the children based off Ephesians 6:1? Fathers. Fathers, in order for me to teach my kid like that, I cannot have a career that takes me away for long periods of time. How will it work? Some of my buddies, when they make certain decisions, I said, I'll just be candid with you. A divorce has happened, okay? Say he's innocent. What? I decide now all of a sudden I want to move to Timbuktu. But you still have children and you still have a responsibility. Are you following me? You as a father have to be there as best as you can for that child. What did he say do? Hear, listen, not just listen, but obey it. For what purpose? So that you can prosper in this land of milk and honey. And so that Deuteronomy 28-30 doesn't happen, blessings and cursings, so that you can stay blessed. And whosoever the Lord loves, he chastens, so that you don't have to be disciplined by the Lord for your bad decisions, but you need to be there. And so I tell some of my friends who have find themselves in various predicaments, yes, this thing has happened, but you still have this right here. And God has still commanded that the father do what? Teach. And teach them diligently when you wake up, when you lie down, when you rise, and throughout the way, when you walk by the way. There is a responsibility to teach. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Constantly do everything you can to teach your child, to give them the best chance to overcome the wiles, the schemes, the trickery of the devil. So there is no doubt a pattern that we see, and that pattern involves a lot of time. But sometimes we understand there's a lot of time, but there's a lot of things that compete for our time. And sometimes the things that are mainly competing for our time is the money. And it's not that you don't have to have money, but sometimes it's the excess and the desire of materialism. And because we want to have the finer things in life, we sacrifice this over here. And we say, because I do A and B, which is bring them to Wednesday night Bible study and Sunday morning Bible class, then I've done my part. Well, this right here mentions every day. Do you see the biblical pattern that we're talking about? And so here, this Shema, they would constantly recite this. Remember, we talked about the different prayer times that they had a couple weeks ago and so forth like that. But this, to me, is a biblical parenting model. But notice what he says. Let me go back to that verse. Look at what verse 5, what you're constantly reminding the children of. Look at verse 5. That you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Well, in John chapter 14, verse 15, John says, if you love me, do what? Keep my commandments. And his commandments are not burdensome. His commandments are not grievous. In John chapter 15, verse 14, you are my friends if you do whatsoever I command of you. Well, what's the command right here? Love God with everything that you possibly can. Say I do all of these things, but I don't have love. Revelation 2, the church at Ephesus, it profits you nothing. So we have to teach the children to love God and love him from a pure heart. What happens when they don't have that love? Here's the flip side of it, all right? Look at, what is that, Judges? Yeah, Judges chapter number 2. Flip over a few books. Deuteronomy, Joshua, and then comes the period of the Judges. And Judges are really military leaders, all right? It's really what they are, all right? And then after that, they get a king, which is not God's particular plan. Let's look at something. Judges chapter number 2. Now, Joshua has died. You remember Caleb was old and he said, give me this land, and he gets it. And then his daughter gets what those other things. But now Joshua has died. So let's put this in perspective. Joshua and Caleb, remember, they wandered for how many years? 40 years for sins of others. they had to wonder and wait till those generation died off, even though they had faith. Y'all remember that? Now, Joshua you've heard the last of a dying breed. You've heard that expression. Now, let's see if we can make a little application. Verse 6 of chapter 2, Judges 2, when Joshua dismissed the people, is that his death right there? Yeah, that's good. That'll start right there. The people of Israel went each to his inheritance, take possession. The people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. And Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. And they buried him within the boundaries of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gash. And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers. And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. Hosea says, my people perish for a lack of what? Knowledge. What are they missing right here? Go back to that verse, and verse 10. When all that generation was gathered to their fathers, the next generation that comes, they did not know who? The Lord. Deuteronomy chapter 6, they were supposed to be loving him with everything that they have, but they don't know him. They don't know the work that he done for Israel. So there's not a sense of appreciation of history. That's why we have days like today, Veterans Day, where we remember the sacrifice of those, all right? They don't know the history of God here. Verse 11, and the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they served the Baals. And they abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. Slow down a minute. Remember at the end of Joshua 24? Joshua says, as for me and my house, we'll do what? Serve the Lord. But everybody else said, yeah, we're going to do the exact same thing too. Remember that? If you keep reading it, you remember how it goes? And what's happened right here? Part of serving the Lord was teaching what? Teaching the next generation. And here's this generation does not know about their God. They dropped the ball. And look who's finna suffer. And man, this thing's about to get bad as you keep reading it here. So you got Joshua chapter 2, Judges chapter 2, verse 12. Now get to verse, he says, they went after other gods from among the gods of the peoples who were around them, and they bowed down to them, and they provoked the Lord to anger. They abandoned the Lord. They served the Baals and the Ashtaroths. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them over to plunderers who plundered them, and he sold them into the hand of the surrounding enemies, so they could no longer withstand their enemies. Whenever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them for harm, as the Lord had warned, and as the Lord had sworn to them, and they were in terrible distress. You see, when we no doubt have a lament over our children and over our loved ones, right? Because you love them. But think about that person that's going through that actual thing. Think about you going out to war and knowing that the Lord, the creator of all the world, is against you. But because there's a generation that did not know who? God. So this is why it's imperative to do everything we can. Even if you know your child or mine, or you get able to get your grandchild or whatever, do everything you can to teach them, to try to plant that seed, Luke 8 and 11. All right? Let's continue to look at this biblical model. 1 Samuel chapter number 2. Here's another one that's when you consider Samuel, this right here, it's kind of another, those things that are written aforetime are written for our learning. We can definitely learn from 1 Samuel chapter 2. And let's start at verse 12. Now Eli is a priest, all right? And he has two sons. Y'all remember that? Hophni and Phinehas. Now let's start at verse 12 of 1 Samuel chapter 2. Now the sons of Eli were what? Worthless men. Boy, that's hard. They did not know the Lord. The custom of the priest with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant would come while the meat was boiling with a three-pronged fork in his hand and would thrust it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is what they did at Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. Moreover, before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the man who was sacrificing, "Give me meat for the priest to roast, for he will not accept boiled meat from you, but only raw." And if the man said to him, "Let them burn the fat first, and then take as much as you wish," he would say, "No, you must give it to me now. And if not, I will take it by force." Thus the sin of the young men was very great in the sight of the Lord, for the men treated the offering of the Lord with contempt. Now think about this. Eli's the priest, and your boys are over here doing this right here, and you're basically whooping on people that don't want to go along with your sin. And these are the people that are supposed to be serving in front of God. It's almost whimsical if it wasn't so sad, right? But let's keep reading. We got to get to verse 25, verse 18. You remember this dream that Samuel has. We taught this a little bit before. Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy clothed with a linen ephod, and his mother used to make for him a little robe. Remember, his mom was Hannah, and take it to him each year, when she went up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Then Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "May the Lord give you children by this woman, for the petition she asked of the Lord." So then they would return to their home. Indeed, the Lord visited Hannah, and she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the young man Samuel grew in the presence of the Lord. Remember, Hannah was barren, and she said, "Lord, if you give me a child, a son, I will give him over to him, and he will serve you all the days of his life." And so Eli said, since you did this, he's praying that he gets some more children. All right, verse 22. Now, Eli was very old. That part always sticks out to me. And he kept hearing all that his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who were serving at the entrance of the tent meeting. And he said to them, "Why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil doings from all the people. No, my sons, it is no good report that I hear from the people of the Lord spreading abroad. If someone sins against a man, God will mediate for him. But if someone sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him?" But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of the Lord to put them to death. Now here he is, he has 2 sons, and he knows about this right here, and he tries to do something, does he not, so far, and he tells them. The interesting thing, when you flip over to chapter 3 of 1 Samuel chapter 3, look at verse 13. All right, look at verse 13. Here is God calling Samuel in a vision, but he doesn't know it's God. And so he goes to Eli, and ultimately he says, he's going to tell him, "Speak, Lord, thy servant hear it," which means command and I will obey. And if you drop down, what verse did I say? 13. Look at verse 13. He says, "And I declare to him that I'm about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming, and he did not restrain them." Wasn't enough just to say, "I know this" right here. He was expected to do more, So I take from that, I have to do everything I can. If I know in this particular situation, Eli had to do more. Even though he was an older man, God expected him to exert more. Obviously, he did not do that. But I look at myself and I look at parenting, and you have to ask yourself, am I doing enough? Do I need to do more? And I look at it, there's always something more that I can be doing, because we should always be trying to get better. One of the things that is noted about Job, that he was an upright man. In Job chapter 1, it says, Job would offer a sacrifice if perchance or perhaps one of their children had sinned or did something against God. He was always thinking about his family and trying to make the best decisions for his family. And that's what a godly father should do. We should always be trying to teach our children to love the Lord with their whole being, with all their soul, with all their strength, with all their might. All right? Now, 1 Samuel chapter 8. Let's wrap this lesson up. All right? So, 1 Samuel 8 is going to talk about Samuel. Now, remember, Samuel was a little boy. And I didn't read all of 1 Samuel 3. I quoted some of it. But remember, he has this dream. He has this vision. And he wakes up and he keeps going to Eli. And Eli says, I didn't call you. Go to sleep. He wakes up, go to sleep. And then the Lord tells him, I'm about to do this thing to Eli. All right. So Samuel, as a young boy, has seen certain things, has he not? He has seen these things. So keep that in mind when we read 1 Samuel chapter 8. Let's start at verse 1. When Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn son was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba, yet his sons did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, Behold, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. In 3 John, the letter of 3 John, he says, Beloved, I have no greater joy than to know or to hear that my children walk in the faith. I have no greater joy. Let me make sure I quoted that right. But it's 3 John verse 3. All right. I don't want to quote that wrong. 3 John 3. There's a thought process. But the other words, John, who is an elder now, who's an older person, no doubt, has joy. 3 John, it's only one chapter book, writing to Gaius, Beloved, I pray that all may go well with you and that you may be in good health as it goes well with your soul. For I rejoiced greatly when my brothers came and testified to your truth, as indeed you are walking in the truth. Verse 4, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. When it's all said and done, one of the best feelings that you can have is that you've done what you're supposed to do, and you get to see that your children have made the best decision, which is to love God with all their heart. And so he says, I have no greater joy than that. But I think about Eli as an older man hearing about what his son's doing and not restraining them. And now I think about Samuel in the process of time, right? And in 1 Samuel chapter 8, and Samuel, as a result of Samuel's sons not being faithful, you know what the people ask for? You know what they say, give us? A king. In 1 Samuel chapter 8, he says, verse 4, Behold, your sons are old and do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge. And Samuel prayed to the Lord. He knew that they weren't supposed to have this king. But because the people looked out, Samuel, you're old. You're about to go all the way of the earth. And how can your sons lead us? And they live this life like this. So just give us a king then. Pick us out a king. And the Lord goes along with it. But remember what the psalmist said. And the Lord granted their request and sent leanness unto their souls. Sometimes be careful what you ask for. He told them how the kings were going to do and take from them and so forth. And they do the whole thing. Eli did not do right. Samuel, and whatever it is, his boys are right there in that same scenario there, and they're in their older age. What's my point? I pray that we do everything in our power now as parents to stick with the biblical model to teach our children. Number 2, even if our children are old, you realize that you still have knowledge. As I'm older now, I call home more. And I ask. I don't call home a lot. I'm not going to exaggerate to you, okay? I need to do a better job of calling home. But if there's something on my mind or something about my kids or something like that, I'll call my dad and I'll ask him something like that. Or I'll ask him, why was this or something like that. I will do that. Still need to do a better job of that. But anyways, I appreciate things more. All right, let's look to a couple Proverbs and end this thing. Proverbs 13:24. He who withholds his rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him diligently. He who withholds his rights, a part of rearing children is corporal punishment mean spanking? That's what I thought. No, it doesn't. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. John is saying no. I thought it meant that. I just wanted to double check. He's giving me a hard time. That's not nice of you, brother. But anyways, part of discipline is spanking a little bit. That's not the only method, though. Sometimes you got to do things in combination, all right? When I got to the point one time I was getting a whooping. I said, well, I'm not going to cry this time. I squeezed my buttocks as tight as I can, boy, and suck that lip in or something like that. And see, my parents take that as a challenge. Oh, you're not going to cry? Oh, we can do this all day. I learned that lesson there. But anyways, the main point is that at times, and I take this right here with the idea of that tree analogy, of that shoot, bending it when it's young, molding it, shaping it there, and when it's get older, you can't. It comes a point where you got to let them make their own decisions and make their own mistakes. There's no two ways about it. One of the worst things I've seen is when the grandmama always bails out the grandson from the penitentiary or from jail. But then they really do something really bad, and now you got a 20-year bid. Can't bail him out now. Can't afford the bail bonds either. Maybe he had to let him sit his tickets out or whatever it was the first time. He'd have been a lot better, Don't withhold that from him, all right? Here's the idea of that word diligently again, going back to Deuteronomy chapter 6, all right? Next, Proverbs 19:18. Discipline your son while there is hope, and do not desire his death. Paul would tell Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 2, trying to encourage him because he's discouraged at Paul's sufferings and various things. He says, and from a child thou hast known the holy scriptures, which are able to make thee wise and save thy soul unto salvation. I quoted that wrong. And then he also would talk about in 2 Timothy chapter 1, he says, I am convinced, I am persuaded of this unfeigned or this genuine faith that dwelt first in your grandmother and in your mother, Lois and Eunice, right? He had something when he was a child. Discipline your son while there is hope, and do not desire his death. It's hard sometimes to discipline your child, is it not? I've lived long enough, when you say, son, this hurts me more than it hurts you. Let me tell y'all something. Somebody said a little kid was showing out in church, and the daddy took him out. And as he was going out, I think it was maybe Nana Joe told me this. As the kid was going out, he said, pray for me, please. Yeah, I'm going to pray for you, buddy, that you don't make those same decisions no more. But anyways, I thought that was too funny. But you train them up now while there's hope. And there's no desire, do not desire his death. In other words, you got to make sure if you desire his death, sit back and do nothing. Judges chapter 2, another generation that knew not God, a generation. Proverbs 23:13-14, do not hold back discipline from the child. Although you strike him with the rod, he will not die. You shall strike him with the rod and rescue his soul from Sheol. I was talking to Brother John Bivens this morning, police officer. At schools, if you write something in there, whatever these files are they have, and if they say, oh, he has this problem right here, if he smites the kid, hits the kid or whatever, he goes to the office, Johnny, don't you do that. And then they send him right back, okay, because it's in his file or whatever. Absolutely hogwash. And when I found this out from talking to one of the teachers or whoever it was, I said, you're setting the kid up for failure. Because he don't have enough sense, or she ain't going to have enough sense when the police officer pulls him over and asks for their license. Why I got to do that? Wrong time, buddy. Wrong choice now. I need you to get out of my car. I don't want to. I'm going to lock my door. It's finna get real. You see what I mean? And now you find yourself behind bars, and you ain't better than Bubba. See what I mean? And so I said, we are setting our children up for failure with this stuff, man. You better get a hold of them now, because there's always somebody bigger and badder. All right, Proverbs chapter 22, verse 15. Foolishness is bound up in the heart, i.e. the mind of a child, but the rod of discipline will remove it far from them. Many of us as dads have a hard time with our daughters sometimes. I used to have that at first a little bit, but boy, they'll do something, and you're like, you know what, that's it. All that cute stuff is out the window. It's time to get after it. But anyhow, it's true. It is true. It's hard sometimes to do it, but then you say, you know how certain things are cute for a little bit? Oh, they did this, and you laugh at it. It's kind of cute. But then they're 2 or 3 years older, and they're still doing it, and it is not cute anymore at all. But what did you just do by allowing it in the first place? You created the monster. And now you want to get on to them, and they're like, I can't believe you did me that. You don't love me. Because you see that this is a bad thing. Train up a child from a youth, all right? Where is that one where it says child? Do not hold back discipline from the child. Do it now while that child is young and while there is hope, all right? While there is still hope. The biblical model for parenting is one that is constantly teaching the Word of God diligently when you wake up, when you lie down, and when you go throughout your day. And what do you teach them? The love of God. The love of God. We sing that song, The Love of God. How rich and pure, how marvelous. That's what we're teaching them. The fear of the Lord, a healthy reverence and respect for God, and that God loves you. And you want them to be motivated to serve God because of the love that God has for them. Right? Not just a fear of Sheol, the grave, or hell. I hope I've said something to help all of us, parents, future parents, those that have nieces and nephews, grandparents, whatever you find yourself in, to know that there is a biblical model. And to strive diligently to do everything you can to help out our children make heaven. To make heaven. Acts 18, the Corinthians heard the gospel message, a wicked city, but they hear the gospel message that a Savior died for men for their sins, and they could be restored back to the Creator of the universe, God. They heard that message, they believed that message, and according to that message, they were baptized. Acts chapter 18, verse 8. If you